Andrew Caldwell sat in his own restaurant, hungry and ignored, as his staff judged him for his appearance. The only person who treated him with kindness was a waitress who had no clue she was serving the CEO. Andrew had spent the last 3 decades building his restaurant empire. What started as a small family-owned bistro had grown into Caldwell's Grill, a chain of upscale dining spots scattered across the country. His establishments catered to an elite clientele, business executives, celebrities, and well-to-do families expecting impeccable service and a luxurious experience. Yet, despite his success, something was off. He had started receiving complaints, sporadic at first, like an email here or a social media post there, but over time, a pattern emerged. Customers claimed that Caldwell's Grill treated lower-income patrons with indifference, sometimes even outright contempt. Rumors spread that certain staff ignored guests who looked cheap, turning their backs on anyone who didn't appear to be a big tipper. Andrew had built his brand on the promise of quality, not just in the dishes but in the hospitality. If his restaurants were failing at that, it wasn't just a business problem, it was personal. One evening, sitting in his high-rise apartment in Houston, Texas, he scrolled through the latest complaint on his phone. "I walked into Caldwell's Grill last night hoping for a good meal after a long day. I wasn't dressed fancy, but I had money to spend. The staff looked at me like I didn't belong. Nobody greeted me, and I waited for 20 minutes before someone finally showed up, making it clear I wasn't a priority. I left humiliated. Do better." Andrew set his phone down on the marble countertop, exhaling slowly. He had worked too hard to let something like this tarnish his reputation. He needed to see the issue firsthand, and he knew exactly how to do it. The next morning, he dug through his closet, pushing aside tailored suits and designer jackets until he found what he was looking for, an old, faded flannel shirt and a pair of worn-out jeans. He slipped them on, letting the loose fabric swallow him. Then came the finishing touches, a scruffy beard he'd let grow over the past few days, an old baseball cap pulled low, and scuffed sneakers he hadn't worn in years. Checking his reflection, he no longer resembled Andrew Caldwell, the multimillionaire CEO. He looked like a weary, down-on-his-luck man who just needed a decent meal. Dressing the part wasn't enough, he needed to feel it. So, before heading to Caldwell's Grill, he left his wallet at home, carrying only a few crumpled dollar bills. If he truly wanted to test his staff's kindness, he couldn't rely on his wealth as a safety net. He took the city bus instead of his usual black SUV, feeling every impatient sigh and judgmental stare from strangers who assumed he was just another broke guy with nowhere better to be. By the time he stepped off at the restaurant, the sun was dipping low, casting a warm glow over the sleek glass exterior. He took a deep breath, adjusted his cap, and pushed open the doors to his own restaurant, this time as a nobody. What happened next was something he never expected. As soon as Andrew walked inside, the atmosphere shifted. Caldwell's Grill was everything a high-end restaurant should be: elegant lighting, modern black and gold decor, and the faint aroma of seared steak and truffle butter. Waiters in crisp uniforms moved with practiced finesse, balancing plates of gourmet entrees and wine glasses filled to just the right level. But there was also an unspoken hierarchy in the air. Andrew paused near the entrance, observing how the staff interacted with customers. A well-dressed couple got warm smiles and was promptly escorted to a table. A man in a tailored suit barely spoke before a waiter rushed over, pulled out his chair, and handed him a menu. Andrew, meanwhile, was met with a far different reception. Allison, the hostess, likely in her mid-20s, glanced up from her podium. Her gaze swept from his faded flannel to his battered sneakers. She didn't smile or offer a greeting, just pursed her lips slightly. "Can I help you?" The tone suggested she wasn't in the mood for small talk. Andrew nodded. "Just looking for a meal." Allison raised a meticulously groomed eyebrow. "Do you have a reservation?" He nearly laughed. He knew the reservation book was full tonight, but also that VIPs and generous tippers never seemed to have trouble finding a table. "No," he admitted, "but I was hoping you had something available." She sighed, tapping her glossy, manicured nails on the screen in front of her. It's going to be at least an hour. Andrew glanced around and spotted 3 empty tables. He knew from experience those were often left open for walk-ins who looked like they could afford it. Before he could reply, a deep voice interrupted. "I've got it, Allison." Andrew turned to see a tall, broad-shouldered man wearing a pressed button-down. His name tag read Manager Ryan Caldwell. Allison seemed relieved to pass the situation on to her boss. Ryan gave Andrew a quick once-over, then forced a polite but insincere smile. "Sir, as our hostess mentioned, we're at capacity tonight. Might be best to try another restaurant nearby." Andrew held his ground. "I don't mind waiting." Ryan's jaw tightened. "We have a particular atmosphere here, and most of our patrons come for a specific experience. If you're looking for something more casual, there's a diner a few blocks down." There it was, the dismissal he had anticipated. Feeling it firsthand was something else, though. Andrew inhaled slowly, keeping his expression neutral. He wouldn't argue or pull rank, he was here to watch them bury themselves. Before Ryan could insist that Andrew leave, another voice chimed in, "I can seat him." Andrew turned, and for the first time that night, saw a genuine smile. She was young, mid-20s, maybe, with warm brown skin and dark, expressive eyes. Her uniform was neatly pressed, but there was a tiredness in her posture, like someone working twice as hard for half the pay. Her name tag read Sierra. Ryan sighed, clearly irritated. "Sierra, we don't have any open." "The table by the window," she interrupted, calm but resolute. "It's empty." Ryan's expression darkened, but Sierra didn't flinch. She grabbed a menu, gestured for Andrew to follow, and led him past the stares and hushed whispers of the other staff. Andrew took a seat, having no idea how far her kindness would go, or what it might cost her. He sank into the chair, feeling the weight of the evening settle on his shoulders. The dining room buzzed with subdued conversation and the occasional clink of silverware, but his table remained an island of uneasy silence. Sierra set a menu before him, her expression professional yet genuinely warm. "Would you like something to drink?" Andrew glanced at the prices, which he knew by heart, but this time saw them through the eyes of someone who might be counting every penny. Even the cheapest glass of wine cost more than some people earned in an hour. "Just water," he said quietly. "If that's okay." Sierra didn't hesitate. "Of course." She disappeared, returning moments later with a tall glass of water, setting it down gently. "Take your time with the menu, let me know if you have any questions." He didn't quite know how to respond. He had walked in expecting to see the flaws that customers had complained about. But here was Sierra, treating him like he mattered, like he belonged, even when everything about him screamed otherwise. Other servers passed by, ignoring him. They laughed with well-dressed patrons, poured wine with flair, and leaned in attentively to take orders. Yet when their eyes flickered to Andrew, they offered only a dismissive glance. Sierra, however, saw him. When she returned a few minutes later, she leaned in and lowered her voice. "I don't want to overstep, but if you're not sure what to order, I can bring out something small, on me." Andrew felt his throat tighten. He could have afforded a meal worth hundreds of dollars without blinking, but at this moment, he let himself imagine truly not having the money to spare. He looked up at her. "You don't have to do that." "I know," she said simply. "But I want to." She walked off to the kitchen, returning soon after with a small bowl of soup and a slice of fresh bread. Though the portion was modest, it was plated as meticulously as any other dish leaving the kitchen. Andrew stared at it for a moment before lifting the spoon. The soup was rich, perfectly seasoned, and the bread was soft and buttery. But it wasn't about the food, it was about Sierra's kindness. He glanced at her name tag, mentally committing it to memory. But before he could speak, a sharp voice broke the moment. "Sierra, a word." Ryan stood by the kitchen doors, arms crossed, clearly displeased. Sierra exhaled, gave Andrew an apologetic look, then followed her manager. From his table, Andrew couldn't hear the entire conversation, but he caught words like wasting time and not a priority. He also saw Ryan glare in Andrew's direction. Sierra returned soon after, forcing a small smile. She didn't mention what had just happened. "Need anything else?" she asked quietly. Andrew shook his head, noting the fatigue in her eyes. She had no idea who he was or what he could do. Tomorrow, she was about to find out. The following day, Caldwell's Grill opened as usual. Staff bustled about, setting tables, polishing glassware, and preparing for another busy night. None of them knew that everything was about to change. At 6 p.m., Andrew Caldwell stepped through the front doors. But this time, he wore a tailored suit, polished loafers, and carried an unmistakable sense of authority. Allison, the hostess, straightened up instantly, her practiced smile in place. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Caldwell's Grill." Andrew ignored her greeting, his eyes scanning the room until he spotted the one person he was looking for, Sierra. She was in the middle of delivering plates to a table when she glanced up. Her face went pale with recognition. The murmur began almost at once. Waiters and hostesses whispered to each other, shooting looks at the sharply dressed man by the entrance. Ryan, stepping out of his office, froze in place. Andrew walked across the room, each step measured. Those who had dismissed him last night now stood at attention. He stopped in front of Ryan, who was now trying to muster a smile. "Mr. Caldwell," Ryan said, voice tight. "What a surprise. If I'd known you were coming, we could have." Andrew cut him off. "Do I look like a man who needs special treatment?" His tone was calm but carried weight. Ryan swallowed hard. "No, sir, I just meant." Andrew's gaze swept the room. "I came here last night to see how my staff treats people who don't look wealthy. And what I saw," he paused, letting silence speak volumes, "was unacceptable." Ryan's face went pale. "Sir, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," Andrew replied. "I saw my own staff turn their backs on me, treating me like I was a problem. Only one person offered me respect, and when she did, she was reprimanded for it." He looked at Sierra, his voice softening. "Sierra, you stood up for me, even when you didn't know who I was. Even when it could have cost you your job." Sierra's eyes widened. She had no idea the unkempt man from last night was actually the owner of the entire chain. Andrew pulled a small card from his pocket and handed it to her. She hesitated, then read it, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Promoted to general manager, effective immediately." A hush fell over the room. Sierra's hands trembled. I don't understand," she stammered. "You don't belong waiting tables," Andrew said simply. "You belong running this place." Ryan made a strangled sound. "Sir, you can't be serious." "I can and I am," Andrew said, turning to him. "And you're fired." Allison gasped. The young waiter who had asked Andrew to prepay looked like he might faint. Ryan tried to protest, but Andrew silenced him with a single, piercing look. "If leadership means bullying employees and driving away customers, you're not qualified," Andrew stated. Then, scanning the entire staff, he added, "I suggest everyone else think about how they treat people. Starting tonight, things change around here." Sierra stared at the promotion card, tears pooling in her eyes. "But why?" she whispered. "Why me?" Andrew's voice softened. "Because when no one else did, you saw me. Now it's my turn to see you." From that moment on, Caldwell's Grill would never be the same. The restaurant froze in silence. Sierra stood with the card in her trembling hand, unsure if she was dreaming. Andrew waited for her to speak, but the shock was too great. Finally, she managed, "I don't know what to say." He smiled gently. "Say yes." She looked around, half expecting someone to shout that this was all a joke. "I've never managed a restaurant before. I know the basics, but..." Andrew shook his head. You know how people should be treated. That's what matters. Her voice steadied. Then yes. I'll do it. Several staff members exchanged glances, some in awe, others in nervous confusion. Andrew turned to Ryan. Collect your things. Ryan's face contorted. All this over some random waitress. Andrew's eyes flashed. Her name is Sierra. And that's the difference between you and her. Ryan bit back whatever he was about to say and stormed off toward the back office. Allison, the hostess, stepped back, rethinking every dismissive moment from the night before. Andrew exhaled and looked at Sierra. You start tomorrow, he said, but for now, take the night off. Go celebrate. She blinked. Are you sure? Andrew chuckled. You're the boss now. You don't need my permission anymore. Sierra left, her face a blend of shock and cautious joy. Andrew watched her go, feeling something he hadn't felt in a while, hope. Then he turned to the remaining staff, who stood like statues. This restaurant changes now, he declared, starting tonight. We will treat every customer with the same respect, whether they walk in wearing a suit or an old flannel shirt. Understood? No one dared to argue. A few nodded, relief mixing with unease. Andrew took one last look around before walking out into the warm Houston evening. He knew it wasn't just a restaurant that had changed, he had changed, too. Some people only show kindness when they expect something in return. Real kindness, the kind that can transform lives, happens when nobody's watching. Sierra had no clue she was serving the company's CEO, she simply did what felt right. And that made all the difference. So next time you have the chance to be kind, take it. You never know who's watching or whose life you might touch. If this story resonated with you, stick around for more. There's always another lesson to learn and another story to share.